Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining tonight's calendar conversation. My name is Shadae Harris, and I serve as the Chief Engagement Officer for Richmond Public Schools. We are thrilled to have everyone with us this evening as we share information about the 2021-2022 calendar proposal that really focuses on equity and providing more instruction to students who need it. But even more importantly, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your feedback and your questions on the proposed calendar. Carlos, I don't think you've crossed over to the stream, so if you just want to mute yourself, but I'm glad it's working. Thank you. So again, we want to hear your feedback. We had a great town hall yesterday with almost 100 people in our Easton. And again, anyone can join these town hall. We set them up regionally, but feel free to join any town hall that you would like. Just a couple reminders as we get started. One, everyone who has joined will be muted during the presentation. Once the presentation is over, we're going to move to question and answer. We would love to have a conversation with you. So you can use the raise the hand feature found below on your taskbar and let us know you have a question. And then from there, we'll call on you and we can unmute you so that we can hear your voice. Or if you don't want to do it that way, you can always put your question in the chat and we will be happy to read it. I'm also joined by Nanette Bailey, who is our West End coordinator, and she'll be helping me read questions this evening. So again, we'll remind you when the Q&A portion starts. And now I'm going to turn it over to Superintendent Kamras.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harris, and good evening, everyone. Before we get started, I want to recognize a few school board members that we have on. I see Ms. Rizzi, Ms. White, Mr. Young. I'm trying to scroll through to see if there's anyone else. Would any school board members like to say just a few words? I'll pass the mic to you all.
Hi, this is Stephanie Rizzi. I just want to say good evening, and it's great to see you all here. And I'm looking forward to having a really productive conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Rizzi. Ms. White or Mr. Young, would you like to share any words?
I would like to say good evening, West End, and I would like to hear everything that you have to say on this proposal. I'm sorry that I cannot see you. My camera's not working tonight, but overall, I'm here to hear you, listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. White. And Mr. Young, any words?
Well, I just want to convey my gratitude to everyone for participating in these most important conversations. I'm most bullish on our calendar proposal, but to Shade's point, it's imperative that folks weigh in, continue to weigh in on what arguably is most consequential decision. So most grateful for everybody allowing us to borrow from some of their evening tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have Ms. Dorr as well. Ms. Dorr, would you like to say a few words? I think.
Sorry. I was just unmuted. Hi everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And really grateful to the administration for organizing this meeting. I will say I accidentally signed into the East End conversation. So and there were a couple people on there. So if there's someone on staff that might just be willing to pop into some of the other Zoom meetings, I think there might be some folks that got confused like me.
Awesome. Thank you for letting us know. All right. Well, again, thank you so much to the school board members for joining tonight. Thank you. I see some principals and teachers and community members. It's really wonderful to see everybody's names, at least in all of the boxes, and really excited to spend some time digging into the calendar. I'm going to share my screen in a second just to walk folks through everything. But first, let me just say that I acknowledge there are strong and different opinions about the calendar, and I want to fully acknowledge that I think everybody is coming at this with a desire to do what's best for kids next year. And I know that there are different perspectives on how to get there, and that is completely fine. And I'm going to talk about what I see as the highlights of the calendar, because I do believe in it, but I more than respect anyone who has different opinions, and really excited to engage with folks about things that you have concerns about, or worries about, or you think are or need more attention. So I really want to create an open space for that. I also just want to give a little bit of sort of historical context on the why of year-round calendar. So actually last year in 2020, the school board voted to direct the administration to put together a year-round calendar. So that was really the impetus for this. And they did so with really good reason, which is there is a great deal of research about what's called the summer learning loss or summer slide. In essence, the learning that kids lose by being out of school for a significant amount of time over the summer. And there's some good research that if you implement a program that shortens the summer and provides periods of support throughout the year, often referred to as intersessions, that can be a really positive impact for kids and their learning. So that was the impetus, and then it has become sort of even more topical, so to speak, with COVID, as we try to respond to what will inevitably be learning loss from this year. That's not the fault of our extraordinary teachers and principals and counselors. It's just the reality that virtual instruction for most kids is not going to be as impactful as in-person instruction. So that's really the why of it all. I also want to just acknowledge there are 100 different versions of quote unquote year-round calendars that have different numbers of intersessions, different start dates, different end dates. They all have advantages and disadvantages. We've gone through a couple of iterations and tried to meet a lot of different pieces of feedback for the current iteration. All right, so with that in mind, let me go ahead and share my screen and just kind of dive in, and I'm going to walk everybody through the calendar and then just open it up for questions and discussion. All right, so here is the proposed calendar. Just to orient everybody, if you haven't had a chance to look at this, I'm going to do this by colors. First, the yellow days are just your regular old school days. So that's everything you see in yellow is just the kind of regular school days, not additional days, just our regular 180 days. You'll see the official start date of this proposed calendar is right here, August 17th. You'll see it in red right there. That would be the official first day of school for all RPS students. And you'll see the official last day of school would be June 24th here in red. If you count up all the yellow days, it should add up to 180. And so that is a normal number of school days for a school year here in Virginia. Just a little bit more context, the red days are holidays, days off for breaks, federal holidays, and so on. The purple days are teacher work days. These are special days where teachers just have time to grade or plan or get their rooms ready. The green days are teacher professional learning days. So those are days when there are trainings on curricula and interventions, things of that nature. And then there's a couple of gray days. Those are parent conference days. And then that leaves really the focus of the discussion. Those are the blue days. So you'll see there are 3 weeks of these blue days in late July and early August. Then you'll see another chunk here in November, and then another chunk here in March. Those are the additional optional days that we have been talking about in terms of extra instruction. The extra instruction would be small group. We're talking no more than 8 students per teacher, ideally even fewer. It would focus primarily on literacy for K or pre-K through 8. in the morning of these days. And in the afternoons, we would do enrichment, all kinds of activities to advance and accelerate kids' learning and help them have some fun too. At the high school level, we would focus primarily on courses that are needed for graduation. So if a student was, for example, potentially in jeopardy of failing English 10, they would be prioritized for these extra days so that they could get support, get back on track, and the goal would be to successfully pass the class and get the credit so that they're not in credit recovery or needing to retake the class, anything of that nature. So those blue days are where that extra small group targeted acceleration would occur. These blue days here in July and August, we've just called Jumpstart as a jumpstart to the school year for kids who need it. In November, we call it a fall boost, and in March, the spring boost. So those 7 weeks make up the additional days of instructional time. We would be prioritizing about 5,000 students. It would be completely optional. So we would reach out to families and let them know if their young people qualified. They could say yes, they could say no, and that's completely fine. And we would keep adding students until we reached hopefully the target of about 5,000. The reason for 5,000 is because that is a good number for maintaining the small group nature of this. That would require about 600 teachers, and we feel that's probably the number that would be interested in participating in these extra days. So we've tried to calibrate it accordingly. And that brings me to the teacher piece of this, which is these blue days are 100% optional for teachers as well. If they choose to work these extra days, they would be paid at a rate of $40 per hour. For comparison purposes, our normal extra duty rate is $22 an hour. So this is nearly double. And that's in recognition of the significant commitment teachers would be making to work during these extra days. If they did work all of them, it would add up to more than $10,000 over the course of the year. So a very significant potential pay increase for educators who wanted to do so. Again, completely optional though. And if a teacher did not want to participate, that's fine. And then these blue days are just off days, just like any other off day would be normally. For families who are not participating in these blue day sessions, that time would be off. We are working with out of school and after school providers to provide low cost or free childcare or camp options for any families who weren't participating in the extra days with RPS, but needed support in terms of childcare during these times. So in fact, later this week, we hope that there will be an announcement from folks like the Peter Paul Development Center, YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, and so on, the whole Out of School Time Alliance about how they would focus their attention on providing those opportunities for kids during these times. So that is the calendar in a nutshell. I'm going to stop there and just open it up to questions. I really appreciate all the feedback we've gotten already. I would be the first to concede there is no perfect calendar, and this one is certainly far from perfect, but I do think it is a really good effort to be responsive to the board's guidance to move forward, or at least put together a year-round calendar, and to respond to COVID in a substantial way. And I do believe that we are in a very unique time when it comes to education, and it calls for some different approaches as we move forward. So with that, let me pause, and then glad to open it up to questions. And Shadae, are you gonna take these?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I am. Let's take some questions. And For those of you who are either new to Zoom or are still exploring it, I learn something new every day. The raise your hand feature can be found on the bottom bar under reactions. If you just click on reactions, that's where you can find it. And you just press the raise your hand, and then someone from our team will call on you and you can share with us, or you can type your question in the chat. So let's start with Jody, who had a question. Thanks for hosting this more in-depth discussion. Question, how is this different than the Patrick Henry schedule? And if so, what was the thinking behind differences? Seems like families/staff in that school like the calendar, and it could serve as a case study. I recall board members suggesting we do a pilot before rolling out a year-round schedule to the whole district, but Patrick Henry might serve that purpose.
Yes, thank you so much for this question. It's one I've received from a number of families. The Patrick Henry schedule, my recollection is from studying it, is that it has 3 intersessions over the course of the year. We had a calendar that was more similar to that in an earlier board discussion. We got a lot of feedback that that was too many breaks. And so the version that we have now has the 2 boost sessions, the fall and the spring. And that was in response to that feedback. But as I noted at the top, you can do a year-round calendar in a number of different ways. And the Patrick Henry one is certainly a great calendar. But we were trying to be responsive to the feedback, particularly from families who were concerned about childcare and having 3 different periods over the course of the year when their kids would be out if they were not participating in those extra instructional days.
Okay, Jerome is asking, will there be a component for advanced instruction?
The focus initially would be on kids who were in need of additional support. That doesn't mean, though, that over time, I would love to expand this to really provide opportunities for advancement and enrichment for all children. I don't want to overpromise, though, on our first go around. The focus would really be on young people who are really in need of additional support, particularly coming out of COVID this year.
Can you talk a little bit about when the grading periods will be, and then when would the 22-23 school year start?
So the grading periods would be still driven by the number of traditional school days. So let me go back to the screen share. 1 second, bear with me. All right. So actually, if you look right here in the middle, January 21st, you'll see is a purple day. That's a teacher work day. That's the 90th day of school. So that was intentionally created as a teacher work day so that particularly at high schools, there would be some time to transition between your fall semester and your spring semester. And so, like the 45th day or thereabouts would be somewhere in October. And, at the elementary and middle school level, you'd get your kind of first quarter grades, and then you'd get your second quarter here on January 21st. And then your third quarter would probably be somewhere here in April. Again, we explored initially a calendar that aligned all of the intersessions to those quarters. But again, what that meant is having 3 intersessions during the year. And the feedback we got is that would just be too much for families who weren't participating in terms of childcare, which is why we went with the 2.
Great. Let's take one more from the chat. Then I'm going to have Matthew and Tamika call on some of those who've raised their hand. From Julie, how will we ensure that teachers who choose to teach during the intersessions and during the normal school year do not get burnt out? Is there a maximum amount of teaching days we should propose to ensure teachers have sufficient time off?
Well, I think one of the nice things about this proposal is these extra days are 100% optional. So if a teacher really wanted to work them and was excited about them and had a good sense of their energy level, then great, it's an opportunity for them. And if they didn't, and they felt like, what, I need those days off, that's also completely fine. And some of the research I've read, and I'm not going to try to convince you the research is 100% conclusive. There's a lot of different papers out there, but I have been really encouraged by some of the research on year round, which has shown that it can have really positive benefits for teachers' sort of own stress levels and mental health, because you get these nice 2-week breaks during the year, and that it's an opportunity to just step back, recharge, and do what you need to do to take care of yourself. So I think that is a real benefit. Even the Virginia General Assembly study that was done several years ago about year-round schools in Virginia noted that teachers responded in surveys when they did their research that it had benefits for them professionally and personally. So that was a very encouraging thing to see.
Okay, Jeffrey Sadler.
First off, I just want to thank you all so much for coming up with this schedule. I've been trying to advocate for it for about 2 decades, even before I had kids in the school system. So I'm really, really excited about it. I have 2 questions. I have both students in the school system, and my spouse is a educator in the system. So I'm unclear for working the intercession. Can you choose one of the intercessions or 2 of the intercessions, or would you need to commit to all 3 intercessions?
Yeah, we get this question a lot. Thank you so much for raising it, Mr. Sadler. I think we would love to fill up all of the teaching spots with folks who wanted to commit for all 3, but we recognize that's probably not going to happen, and that folks would want to commit to 1 or 2. And so I think that would be fine. We know that some folks, are going to want some of those days off. So that totally makes sense. I do want to make sure I'm very clear. The extra pay is per the time worked. So if you worked 1 of the sessions, the extra pay isn't 10,000. It's probably closer to 2,000 or 3,000. Just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Great, thanks so much.
Thank you.
And we have William Vance.
Thank you very much for the time. To the school board and the administration, I just want to say thank you. This is a very difficult time, and as I always say, the new norms, but I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing and trying to get done. 2 questions, just real quick. When you talk about the blue days, I'm just concerned about, and maybe I'm getting too removed from the strategicness of it and too much into the tactics or logistics. Will those blue days, will students be able to attend those at their home school, or do you foresee that there will be either not enough teachers so that students may have to be shuttled around to other schools during that time? And I guess I'll just leave it at that question.
Yeah, thank you so much. I do think it will probably depend a little bit on the number of students at a particular school who are participating. So for example, there might be some schools where there is a high percentage of students participating, in which case it would make sense to just do it at the home school. There might be another school, though, where very few students are participating, and it may then make more sense for them to participate at a neighboring school. And we would have transportation and make sure that kids could get to where they needed to go to. So I think it would depend on that calculation. And we would know that if the board approves this, then we would begin the process of sort of notifying eligible families, seeing what the how many folks would commit, where they were, and then making those decisions.
Okay, one more hand, Lynn Jeffries.
Hi, thanks. This is a question or a concern that I shared with you, Mr. Kamras, in an email, and I wanted to just convey it again. There's no details in the proposal about the childcare options. And as a working parent, it's very difficult to get childcare, just even in the summer, much less multiple times a year. And so that's one of my biggest concerns with this proposal is, there's a lot of employers who are not family friendly, and, they're not going to allow their employees to have any flexibility needed if they have to work from home, for instance, during these intersessions, if they can't find other childcare options, or these proposed camps don't work out for them for whatever reason. So I'm just wondering do you have any advisement to give us on this concern? And also, were there other options or other proposals that could be presented to this plan that you have other than this one proposal? Because I know from my own experience with my child, she needs help with math in particular, but it sounds like, I don't know if these focus sessions, these boost sessions are more on literacy and not math, but I know that her tutoring by her teacher 3 times a week has been incredibly helpful during this virtual experience. And even when she was in class, it was still something she needed help with. And it just seems like a tutoring program that could be built into the school day in some way on an ongoing basis, Monday through Friday, where kids could really get help in real time. Was that considered, when you were coming up with this proposal? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jeffries. So just on that last point, let me say, this calendar would not be the only thing we would do next year to support our young people. In fact, the kind of tutoring you're talking about is something that we would like to continue into next year. And we do believe that with the Biden stimulus that was just passed, there are going to be additional resources available to RPS to provide exactly that throughout the year. So really the approach we'd like to take is multifaceted, with this calendar being one of those pieces. I am very empathetic to your concern about childcare, and I don't want to overpromise on free or low cost camps for every child who wants it during these intercessions if you're not participating, because I can't guarantee that. But we are working very hard with a lot of providers around the city to make that happen. I also think with the Biden stimulus, we'll be able to support the cost for many of these things. So I do think it's interesting. This might be the one time that we're able to actually provide a lot of those supports and incentivize camp providers and out-of-school providers to begin orienting themselves to these intercessions, so that if we were to continue this over the long term, this would be something that the whole camp and after school and out of school time community would begin to develop infrastructure around. So I am cautiously optimistic that is going to occur, and we're going to work very hard to provide as many of those resources as we can for working families. We know that's a significant concern. And again, it's why we did have a different version, and you spoke about, are there other versions or other considerations? We did have a different version that we discussed with the school board several weeks ago, or a couple of months ago now. And one of the concerns about that is that it had 3 intercessions during the year. And we just heard the concern you raised from a lot of families. It's just too much to worry about in terms of childcare. And so really what we're down to, the jumpstart days are during what would traditionally be called summer. So, that would be, those would be days that families would be working on childcare anyway. So really what we're down to are these 2 weeks in November and these 2 weeks in March. And that's what we think we can probably help provide low cost or free options for our families.
All right, let's go back to the chat and take some questions. Kimberly wants to know, for the fall boost, will students not in class have additional work, or will they be out of class?
They'll be out of class. That being said, if you wanted your students to have additional work, we can certainly make that happen.
And Shannon wants to know, what have you learned from researching Petersburg failure in year-round learning, and how are you ensuring that Richmond does not make similar mistakes and fall prey to similar pressures?
I think, and I don't know all the details of Petersburg, but I am familiar with it, and I've looked at research from around the country. And I would say that it's kind of the biggest takeaway is, and this isn't all that profound, but, just going to a year-round schedule doesn't in and of itself mean that kids are going to learn more or things are going to change. A lot of school divisions that have gone to year-round, all that they've done is stretch out the calendar to shorten the summer, but not provided really intensive support during intersessions. And that sort of the combination of a shorter summer and really focused support during the intersessions, that's the quote unquote secret sauce of year round. And so, where the research has shown big returns is where that has really been the focus. Where the returns have been mixed or unclear, it's when a lot of attention isn't paid to these extra days. And it's really more just about stretching out the calendar over the course of 11 months.
I think you already touched on this a little, Superintendent Kamras, but do you want to say anything else on the impetus for this change? And then Kimberly also wants to know, can a student do one or the other, spring or fall?
So on that last question, since these days are completely optional, it would be up to the family to say if they wanted their child in both or in one or in none. So that kind of addresses that question. As for the impetus, the school board for some time has indicated a desire to explore a year-round approach. And then in late 2020, the board voted to actually instruct the administration to put together a year-round calendar. And so that's why we're here. I think it's also a great potential response to COVID. I was on a call with Superintendent Lane, the Virginia Department of Education superintendent of all schools last week. And he noted that there are state funds to help maintain something like this. And he would be very excited about even waiving some of the application requirements and such for RPS. He mentioned that on the call. So that was very exciting. I know a lot of the federal funds that are becoming available are really focused on, learning loss and trying to come up with new schedules to help kids catch up. So, it's the combination of the board really being interested in this and directing the administration to go down this path, plus this very unique moment in time that we're in. I think it's somewhat fortuitous that this is all converged at this moment.
Okay, Catherine is interested in knowing, is for teachers working the boost, is it hourly or $10,000 a year? She would be interested in working the extra days, but with how exhausted I am right now, I wouldn't want to commit to teaching every single one of the boost sessions. I'm also extremely concerned about my 107-plus-year-old school being ready ventilation-wise by July. I haven't heard solutions for those who have window AC units and radiators.
So on the first question, yes, there would be option to say, hey, I'd like to work one boost or two boosts or the jumpstart. And it would be as a sort of hourly. So if you worked for one of the boosts, you would be paid for those hours, basically 8 hours a day times the number of days. In fact, we're not going to do stipends because the tax rate for stipends is much higher. And so the money that would wind up in teachers' pockets is a lot less. So we would do it hourly. And then as for HVAC and having, I think the question was about ventilation and whatnot. We are, in the midst of doing a lot of work on that front, from adding in new filtration systems, including in rooms that do not have good airflow, in-room filtration units, standalone units that would have high quality filtration. I want to be very transparent, and I said this at a school board meeting. We are not going to be able to replace every window in RPS by July, August, or a year from now. That is a several $100 million effort that would take multiple years. And so we're going to do what we can to improve ventilation, but where we can't, we'll have in-room units and bipolar ionization for our schools as well. So the combination of those, I think, will provide probably the best air quality that we've had in quite some time.
Great. I'm going to take one more from the chat. Lafanya, she actually has two, and then we'll go to some hands that are raised, after which, Nanette, I'll have you continue with comments. So Lafanya wants to know what childcare options will be available for the breaks, how many spaces will be available for RPS students that will have a unique schedule from the surrounding counties, supported by local daycare facilities. And then 2, how will this calendar impact student athletes? There are training camps offered during the summer months that would conflict with the schedule and VHSL requirements. How would we support those student athletes?
So on the student athletes question, we would work with VHSL to make sure that our students are able to participate in whatever activities they need to. One of the things I will note is there are many divisions in Virginia that are looking at a pre-Labor Day start, some even earlier than what we're proposing here. And so I think there's going to be a statewide effort to rethink some of those training camps. Also, during these intersessions, it's an opportunity for athletes to participate in additional training, additional practices and such. So that actually may offer an advantage to some of our student athletes. And the first question was about number of childcare seats and such. I can't give a guarantee on the number of childcare seats that will be available. That's something that we're in the works on right now. And again, between the Biden stimulus and philanthropy and other commitments that we're hearing from places like YMCA and Boys and Girls Club and so on and so forth, we do think there are going to be a significant number of low cost or free childcare or camp seats for families during the intersessions. And I believe these providers are going to be making some announcement on Friday with more information about some of their commitments on that front.
Thank you for your patience. Matt Percival.
Hi, Superintendent Kamras and Dr. Harris and board members. Thanks for having this extremely informative. Really appreciate it. Can you guys hear me? I just got a message that said I couldn't unmute. Okay,
Yes.
sorry. It seems like this next calendar extremely well thought out. It looks great. So just a question on out years past the next year. From an expectation standpoint, from a continuity standpoint, scale of 1 to 10 with rigidity versus flexibility. In the out years, how rigid or how flexible, 10 being most flexible, do we think the dates might change as far as start dates, end dates, number of intersessions and so forth? Obviously, may need to be some tweaking. We've had the same calendar for decades. So how rigid or fluid do we think that this program will be in the out years?
I would say like 6 or 7. That's just my first inclination. I would want to lean a little bit on a little bit more towards the rigid, only to provide consistency and clarity for families going forward, but with a good 3 or 4 point dose of humility, knowing there are going to be things we learn and things we want to change going forward, and we want to survey teachers and families about what was great, what wasn't so great, how would you want to fix things. But I would want to make sure we're not in a process of annual revolution. I think that would be very disconcerting for families. And so, my hope is it would be some version of this that evolves year after year. So yeah, 6, 7 is kind of where I would think right now.
Ian Johnson.
I can't hear if
Yeah, he's not
No.
talking. I've
Okay.
asked him to unmute. He may have stepped away. Oh,
Oh,
there he
There we
goes.
go. Can you
Hey.
hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, no, I thought it unmuted on its own. I was talking up a storm there. Appreciate you guys putting this together.
It was all brilliant.
Exactly, that's what I thought. Just wanted to make sure. So will this give you guys enough time to fix everything you need to when you open up in July?
Yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. This has come up a lot too, and I think it is a perfectly fair question given there's a lot of work to be done. The one thing I would note is, if I can scroll up here to July, whether we do this or not, we're going to need to do, let's say this isn't approved by the school board, we would still do a very robust summer support program. And that's going to have to happen in our schools. And so that would probably start right around here, the 2nd, 3rd week of July. So I feel like whether we go to this calendar or not, we really have to make sure that our schools are ready by mid-July. And so that's what we're driving towards. And on Monday, we will be sharing sort of the first version of our reopening dashboard, which will show progress on bathrooms and HVAC and so on. We will put that up on the website. We'll share updates at every school board meeting so the public can track how it's going. And as we drive towards July, I do think we will be ready, and I'm gonna move heaven and earth to make sure that we are. I do, again, though, want to manage expectations. I've heard some comments at school board meetings about will we have enough time to renovate our schools by the time we come back in July or August? The answer is no. We are not renovating all of our schools over the next 4 months. I want to make sure that that's 100% clear. What we are doing is ensuring all the bathrooms are up to par and ready to go, that the HVAC upgrades that need to be put in place are ready to go, that we've installed all the signage, all the hand sanitizer stations, that we've done the necessary trainings, put in place protocols, and so on and so forth. We will do all of that, but we are not undergoing a several $100 million renovation of all of our schools. And so I don't want folks to be disappointed coming back in July that they're not walking into sort of brand new or renovated schools, because that's not what we're shooting for.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. I guess then how far off are we then? If it's not going to be a complete overhaul, will you still have things over the summer anyway? If this plan gets voted down, like you'd mentioned, a Head Start initiative there?
Yeah.
For students?
Voted down, we're going to have a robust summer program, and that's going to be in our schools, and it's going to be happening, this 3rd week of July. So one way or the other, we have to be ready by the 3rd week of July. That's sort of what I'm getting at, is we don't have a choice. I appreciate the concern. I do, and there's a lot to be done, and I recognize that, but the calendar really doesn't, whether we adopt this or not, we still need to be ready by the 3rd week of July to bring kids physically into buildings for in-person learning.
Okay, Ms. Bailey, would you like to proceed with questions in the chat?
Yes. And I'm
Great.
just going to move to Yes, the first question is from Nicole, and she has 3 questions actually about the intersession. Approximately how many teachers will you need to teach during the intersession? How competitive will these slots be? Are these slots only limited to reading teachers?
Great questions. We would need about 600 teachers. Based on our survey data so far, about 35 or so % of teachers have expressed interest in working during these times. That's actually more than we need. So I think it would be a little competitive, but not deeply competitive. Certainly, it would be great if there were more folks that wanted to work than there were slots. I would always love to try to figure out ways to do even more. Yes, there would be opportunities for more than just reading teachers. As I noted, the afternoons, we really want to look at enrichment. And so thinking about other kinds of teachers would be incredibly helpful. And also, you don't have to necessarily be a reading specialist. A fantastic kindergarten teacher who is great at teaching reading is going to be an outstanding candidate for the extra time as well. So I do think there are going to be broad opportunities for a lot of different folks to participate.
Okay. The next question is from Jay. It's a series of questions. And what is the impetus for the change? Is it to make up for COVID? Will participation virtually be an option for 21-22? And the last question, when will we know if after-school care is available at John B. Carey?
On the John B. Carey question, I would defer to Principal Powell. I don't know the specifics of their after-school program, but I would say if there's no COVID reason that we wouldn't have aftercare next year. So I would encourage the questioner to reach out to Principal Powell at Carey. Virtual next year. So we will have a virtual pathway and an in-person pathway next year. My commitment is that we will offer in-person instruction to 100% of our students. But we know that 100% of our students and families won't necessarily choose in person, that some percentage will want to remain virtual, and we will provide a virtual pathway for them. And then, Ms. Bailey, remind me what the first question was?
Yes. What is the impetus for the change? Is it to make up for COVID?
So it's really a 2-part impetus. One, the school board has been discussing the idea of year-round for some time, even before COVID, as a response to some of the academic challenges that we face here in RPS. And I think it has taken on greater urgency now because of COVID. So yes, it is also a response to COVID.
Okay. A question from William. Will Blue Days be hosted at designated schools, or will logistics mandate students being shuttled between school locations?
So I think that is going to depend on the number of students at a particular school who are participating in the Blue Days. So for example, let's say there's an elementary school, it has 500 students, and there are 20 students at that elementary school participating. And there's a neighboring elementary school that has 200 students participating. We would probably want to pair those schools and have the 20 go with the 200 for efficiency's sake. So we would have to see once, if the board approves this, then we would reach out directly to families and let them know if they were, their students were kind of in the initial eligibility group, if they wanted to participate, and then we would make those determinations about which schools to use.
Okay, this is a question from Crystal, and I hope I get it correct, but what will be the requirements for career and technical education teachers who are often the sole educator for a course if they have students that want to be remediated during these break periods? That's the first question, and then there's a second part.
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. So if if she could maybe provide a little bit more detail, or you can always email me directly and I can have our CTE team follow up. And this goes for everybody on the call. My email is jkamras, Kamras @rvaschools.net. I'm glad to get you any of those additional details. I'm sorry, I didn't fully understand the details of the question.
Okay, this is a question from Hannah. Do you have any specific goals for this schedule? How do you plan on measuring / evaluating those goals?
I really appreciate that question. I look at this sort of on 3 levels. So first would be participation. And we want to make sure that if we do this, we actually have 5,000 or close to that number of kids participating. Then second is I would, of course, want to see gains in student learning from the participants. And then third, I would want to see the impact on satisfaction from our families, our students, and of course, our teachers. I would hope to see increases in satisfaction and would want to look at outcomes along that indicator, student outcomes and participation, and then make adjustments based on that information.
Okay, we have a question from Anne. Will support staff, such as school counselors and school social workers, have the option to work during the intersessions, or is this option only available to teachers?
There would be some opportunities for support staff. Those folks are critical. And we also see this as an opportunity for us to provide additional social and emotional supports for kids. And we know that social workers and counselors and folks of that nature are vital to that work. So there would be opportunities for others. I don't want to say every additional support staff, but certainly many there would be opportunities for.
Okay, this is a question from Dina. With the changes in science and technology, will RPS consider adding coding and computer programming for RPS students from primary to middle and high school?
Yes, we actually have 2 STEM academies that are just started, one at MLK and one at Henderson. And coding is part of the plan there, but I'd like to do it at the elementary level as well. So that is certainly on the radar screen. And ultimately, our vision is to have a STEM high school where we are pumping out all kinds of great computer science quizzes who will become the next founders of Google and Apple and Instagram and so on. So absolutely.
Okay. This is a question from Jay. Will the students' attendance policy change? People have committed and paid for time off / leave based on previous calendars.
I think that might be in reference to staff. If the yellow days would be required for all staff, and so that it would not be open to discussion. But again, the blue days are completely optional, so there's no requirement that anybody works during those times.
Okay. Question from Kimberly. How will semesters be determined?
Semesters will still be 90 days. So in this proposed calendar, January 21st, which is in purple here, that's a teacher workday. That would be the end of the first semester. And then the second semester would also be 90 days. That is I'm talking about the yellow days. So those are the official days that everybody would need to participate in. Of course, if you participated in the extra days, you would have additional time.
Okay. Question from Tori. Is the additional school days for a selective group of kids / families?
Yes. So we would look at scores on certain assessments to determine who most needs additional support. We would reach out to those families, ask them if they would like to participate, and it's completely voluntary, though we would strongly encourage it. And then we would keep going sort of up the scale to fill all of our spots. And so I think ultimately we would wind up with a nice cross-section of students from different ability levels. And that's fine, because again, the focus here is really small group targeted support and intervention.
Okay. So this is the last question, and then I'm going to send it back to Shadae. But this question is from Kiara. Would there be any consideration for moving the November Blue Days to January, which is the start of the second semester? The pre-holiday season is my busiest time of the year and will have no time for my kids during this time off. Also, having more time with family over the holidays would be fantastic. Travel during this time is so stressful, and I think we would benefit from having a few more days for travel.
Thank you so much for that question. There are other versions of year-round calendars that have the breaks at different times, and absolutely there are advantages and disadvantages to having those days at different times. It is one of the reasons we did try to at least do the fall days around Thanksgiving, to be thoughtful about that. My concern about waiting all the way until January is that it's really a long time between August and January to have a pause to provide additional support for kids. So we felt November was probably the latest we could go. And if you look at the calendar, the way it's sort of designed is there's about 3 months of yellow days in between each of the blue days. So we have this jump start, and then we have about 3 months of yellow, which takes us to November. Then we have another 3 months of yellow, which takes us to March. And then we have another 3 months of yellow. So that was sort of the thinking around how it was set up.
So I just want to thank everybody. This has been an amazing conversation. We have over 150 people on right now, so I know we couldn't get to every comment. I'm going to end with a couple people who have raised their hands, and then after they share, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Kamras, any board members who may want to say a few closing remarks. Just a reminder, if you have a question, you can always email outreach@rvaschools.net, and we will do our very best to get back to you in a timely manner and get that question answered. As you know, Superintendent Kamras is always available as well at jkamras@rvaschools.net. And Tamika, let's call on our last 2 raised hands.
All right. Robin Timmons.
Hi, thank you for having us tonight. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have just 3 questions. You had mentioned hoping to have a low cost or free childcare during the intersession, and I'm wondering if that was taken into account at all in the current budget. My second question is how you all are planning to get feedback from the teachers. I think I've seen lots of comments about how the survey results maybe aren't so reliable because there's no cutoff on who's filling it out and how many times everyone's filling it out. I'm really concerned with teachers who teach in Richmond, however, have their personal children in other surrounding counties, and that would be extremely difficult. And I fear that we would lose a lot of quality teachers because of that discrepancy in calendars. And as an educator myself, I feel like we're just creating this cycle of the kids, some of the kids falling behind and then catching them up and falling behind and catching up. And I feel like it would be more efficient to kind of go in and change the time that they're already in their seats and reduce class sizes and do things like bring in more specialists who can work with them in smaller group settings during the current day that they're already in the seats, rather than having them feel like they're being penalized and forced into the school even more. And the last thing was just, I really wish we would just focus on reopening and not a big calendar change for this coming year. And that's it.
Thank you for those. I guess your second to last point, we will be doing additional things during the 180 yellow days as well. So I know this calendar has gotten a lot of attention for a very good reason, but we will be doing more small group support. And you know, in next year's budget, we added additional reading specialists, and other supports for, you know, the time that they're in school for 180 days, which is the lion's share of the time that they're with us. We talked about the tutoring earlier on the call, so that will also be something that we're looking at. And again, I think with additional funds coming through the Biden stimulus, there will be even more that we're able to do. So absolutely, this is, you know, I agree. I don't want us to be in a situation where it's constantly a game of catch up. My hope is that with a calendar like this, we can actually get kids where they need to be so that we can stop being in this perpetual game of catch up, which is just so hard for kids and teachers. And then on your teacher point, you know, I think it's an excellent one. And so we would prioritize childcare for teachers who live in other places and you know need to you know deal with that consequence as well. So and I think we'll be able to do that.
Okay, our last hand, Janina.
Hello, good evening, and I just want to first say thank you so much to the school board and the administration for, I know, tireless efforts around here. Your school board meetings have become must-see TV on Monday nights, and sometimes y'all put me to bed because you guys are still meeting. So I appreciate the dedication and the passion behind you know, the choices and the questioning and the scrutiny. And I'm appreciative to be part of you know, a parent community that's also scrutinizing. And so for my questions, I have a few that I'm going to kind of lump together. You know, to echo what has been shared around the survey, I understand that the purpose of that was to get a sense. But from an equitable standpoint, I am curious on how, you know, and I do believe that these meetings are helpful, but I'm curious on how we can, you know, the community can provide feedback a little bit with more transparency and accuracy. So I'd love to know if there's an additional survey, perhaps a protected type of survey that may be going out. Also thinking about funds, and I'd love to understand if funds are tied. You know, I understand the impetus of where this came from, but where it is now and the opportunity for additional funds, does that put any pressure on moving forward with this calendar year versus delaying and thinking about putting the schedule together for a year round in 2022? And then also in thinking about teacher and student burnout, also just thinking about not only burnout for those that will be attending more school days, but also just dealing with the change the same way that, you know, we're all reeling from the changes, especially our children with the pandemic. I'd love to know if there's any thought around study and flexibility to pivot as we are moving forward. Should there be any patterns that are you know, revealed or not patterns? My thought process is gone by this time of the day. But in terms of like anything emerging that is that needs to be addressed, is there any room for flexibility to pivot throughout the year? And then with that, the last thing I have to say or ask is really in tandem with this calendar, has there been any consideration in regards to the length of the school day, testing, what the curriculum, any changes that may happen, that may occur? Because I know that for our teachers, this has been a particularly tough year with changes in the curriculum. And also thinking about downtime for children and teachers in length of lunch periods, recess, study hall, Has that been considered in with this calendar plan? I know that was a lot, so thank
No
you.
problem.
For with me.
Thank you so much for those questions. So on the length of the day, yes, that is something that we considered. That was probably the least popular thing we've ever considered from students, staff, and families. There was just a pretty uniform feeling that burnout was just going to be rather significant if we lengthened the day in any dramatic fashion. So we sort of quickly pivoted away from that. You had asked about, would we iterate and be flexible? I certainly think, going into the next year, I don't think we would want to change things mid-year. I just think that would be very disconcerting to families and to teachers. But certainly we'd gather feedback and make adjustments going into the next year. You had also asked about funding and is that driving this? And, if we waited a year, would the funding still be there? I guess the short answer is some of the funding would still be there, just not all of it. And so I do think while the funding isn't driving it, I think there's a unique opportunity this year and then going into next year. And then you had asked about the survey, and as I showed at the school board meeting, I'll be the very first person to say the survey is not a scientific survey. I do want to be clear, the reason it is set up the way it is because we heard from staff and families when we started doing surveys a couple of years ago, there was a real concern about anonymity and folks not feeling comfortable to respond to surveys if we were able to track it back to who was responding. So we could very easily set up a survey that requires you to enter in an employee ID number, or if you're a family, enter in a student ID number. And that would keep it very focused on the core constituencies. But there was a lot of concern about that. We could also have it work such that only one ISP address can respond, and the survey won't open up if you try to respond from that same ISP address again. But we even heard from folks that was a concern because then they didn't want ISP addresses to be tracked and that sort of thing. That's why we're kind of in the situation that we're in. It's the same approach we've used for surveys in the past. It's exactly the same approach we used in December when we asked families and staff about the second semester. Yes, it is open to folks taking it multiple times. But that's true of whether you're supportive or not supportive. So I can't really say if that influences things one way or the other. I'm going to continue to believe in the general moral uprightness of folks, and that folks are being thoughtful and only taking it one time and not trying to game the system. But we'll take the data as it is with all of its imperfections, and that's why I think town halls like this are really helpful to hear additional feedback. So thank you so much.
Superintendent Kamras, do you want to end with any closing remarks? And I just want to remind everyone, we will have town halls every night this week. We want to try to be accessible for as many families as possible. Although they're regional, you can attend any one. So as a total, I think we even have one on Sunday. So to be sensitive of time, we have kept them to an hour. But again, anytime you want to email us, please reach out and we're happy to answer your questions, hop on a Zoom with you. I will make myself available. So Superintendent Kamras.
Thank you so much, Dr. Harris. First of all, thank you to you and to the engagement team for setting this up. Really appreciate it. And thank you. I'm looking, it says 143 participants right now. So, oh my gosh, thank you all so much, on a Tuesday night to make time to ask questions, provide feedback, push. I'm so grateful. Again, I know there are a lot of different opinions on this. I think it's in the discussion, in the back and forth, that we get smarter and stronger. And so I'm just incredibly grateful to everyone who is participating tonight. As Dr. Harris said, if you felt like you didn't get your question in and you want to ask more, you can email us at outreach jkamras@rvaschools.net, or you can email me directly, jkamras@rvaschools.net. I'm also glad to set up time to chat on the phone if you want. Just really want to make sure you have all the information that you need to kind of help inform board members as they make this important decision. So again, thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening, everybody.